Listening Practice Test. Please turn to Section 1 of Listening Practice Test. Section 1. Listen to the conversation. You are going to hear a talk given by a tour guide about travel to Esnia. First look at As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions
1 to 4.
Hello everyone. As you know, this agency has specialized in tours and independent travel to Esnia for over 20 years. It's a magnificent place to visit, but it's not always as easy or as comfortable as it might be. So this tour is designed to help you handle the bureaucratic hassles and give you time and energy to enjoy the beauty of this breathtaking country. The first hassle is visas. Nowadays, Esnian visas are needed by almost all nationalities. The normal visa lasts for just 90 days, but a renewal is possible. It is worth leaving yourself plenty of time when applying, or I suggest, from experience, 2 months. That should do it. The latest confirmed price is £30, but it should be noted, and a lot of our regular travellers tell us that the price may change without notice and hold up visa processing. So ring up the Esnian embassy and check the price before sending out forms. Now, for those of you who are intending to take Esnia as part of a longer tour and want to wait till you get to another country, do remember that some Esnian consulates in neighbouring countries require you to provide a letter from your own embassy just to confirm your nationality. You can find a list of major embassies throughout the world in the student handbook on page 13. Oh, and one more thing. Check whether you need a multiple entry visa if you're leaving and re-entering Esnia on your tour.
Before the talk continues, you will have a chance to look at questions
5 to 10.
As you listen, complete the summary and answer question
5 to 10.
Now, some miscellaneous general advice. Firstly, if you're rich enough to bring in over $1,000 in cash or traveller's checks to Esnia, you need to fill in the currency form. Don't forget this. You could get into trouble if you do. You must declare all of your items and more expensive items, such as video cameras, on a tourist export form, which you can arrange to carry in advance. Regarding health regulations, although Esnia is becoming a generally healthier country with every passing year, neighbouring countries remain cautious with regards to health standards there, and therefore it is worthwhile carrying a health certificate. The one you need is the BM276. Now all of you here are students, and there will be plenty of concessions for young people travelling in Esnia. The Esnian Transport Authority, for example, issues a special youth fare card which you can get in any railway station. Just show your international student card. Information about getting this is in the handbook, and give 2 passport photos. And by the way, because there is so much bureaucracy in Esnia, we advise you to take at least 12 passport photos with you. They're not always easy to get done there. Finally, a bit more about currency. Pounds won't get you very far in Esnia these days, so they're no good. We advise people to carry either yen or Australian dollars. US dollars are starting to cause difficulties because of political disputes. Another surprise is that credit cards are virtually useless because of fraud scandals. Do carry traveller's checks, but we advise medium denominations. Large denominations increase the likelihood of theft, and small ones increase commission charges. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this student handbook has a wealth of information.
Section 2. You will hear a radio broadcast called Focus on the Arts. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16 on page 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello, and welcome to Focus on the Arts. I'm your host, Dave Green, and this is your very own local radio programme. Every Friday evening, we put the spotlight on different arts and culture facilities and look at the shows and events that are on offer in the coming week. And today, the focus is on the National Arts Centre. Now, if you don't already know it yourself, I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's famous throughout the world as one of the major venues for classical music. But did you know that it's actually much more than just a place to hear concerts? The centre itself is a huge complex that caters for a great range of arts. Under a single roof, it houses concert rooms, theatres, cinemas, art galleries, and a wonderful public library, as well as service facilities including 3 restaurants and a bookshop. So, at any one time, the choice of entertainment there is simply enormous. So, how did they manage to build such a big arts complex right in the heart of the city? Well, the area was completely destroyed by bombs during the war in 1940. So the opportunity was taken to create a cultural centre that would be what they called the city's gift to the nation. Of course, it took a while for such a big project to get started, but it was planned in the 60s, built in the 70s, and eventually opened to the public in 1983. Ever since then, it has proved to be a great success. It's not privately owned, like many arts centres, but is still in public hands. It's run by the City Council. Both our National Symphony Orchestra and National Theatre Company were involved in the planning of the project, and they're now based there, giving regular performances every week. And as the centre is open 363 days of the year, there are plenty of performances to choose from.
Before you hear the rest of the broadcast, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20 on page 5. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
So, to give you some idea of what's on, and to help you choose from the many possibilities, we've made a selection of the star attractions. If you're interested in classical music, then we recommend you go along to the National on either Monday or Tuesday evening at 7:30 for a spectacular production of The Magic Flute, probably the most popular of all Mozart's operas. It's in the Garden Hall, and tickets start at only £8, but you'll have to be early if you want to get them that cheap. And remember, it's only on for those 2 evenings. For those more interested in the cinema, you might like to see the new Canadian film, which is showing on Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. in Cinema 2, and that's called 3 Lives. It's had fantastic reviews, and tickets cost just £4.50, which is a reduction on the usual price of £5.50. So, it's really good value, especially for such a great movie. But you can see the centre's main attraction at the weekend, because on Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m, they're showing a wonderful new exhibition that hasn't been seen anywhere else in Europe yet. It's a collection of Chinese art called Faces of China. That's in Gallery 1, and it has some really fascinating paintings and sculptures by leading artists from all over China. And the good news is that it's completely free, so don't miss it. So why not go along to the National Arts Centre next week for one or all of these great events? And you can always pick up a programme and check out all the other performances and exhibitions on offer, or coming soon, on almost every day of the year. Next week, we'll be looking at the new Museum of Science.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3 on page 6.
Part 3. Following instructions from their tutor, you will hear two trainee teachers discussing the use of origami, a paper folding activity, in the classroom. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
So now I want you to discuss the lesson we've just been watching on the video and think about the ways in which origami can be a useful educational tool. Can you all work with the person sitting next to you?
I had no idea that such a simple thing like folding squares of paper to make the shape of something like a bird could be such an amazing tool. It's made me see origami in a whole new light.
I know. It was interesting to see the educational skills the children were developing by doing origami. On the video, you could see them really listening hard to make sure they did all the steps in the right order to make the bird.
That's right. In this lesson, they were working individually, but it would also be interesting to see if the children could work out how to make something simple without being given any direction. That would help with building teamwork as well.
Yes, but much more of a challenge. One thing that really stood out for me was that the children were all having fun while being taught something new.
Which is a key aim of any lesson with this age group. And although these kids had no problems with folding the paper, with younger children, you could do origami to help practice fine motor skills.
Absolutely. Shall we talk about the individual children we saw on the video? I wrote all their names down and took some notes.
Yes, I did too.
OK, good. Let's start with Sid.
He was interesting because before they started doing the origami, he was being quite disruptive.
Yes, he really benefited from having to use his hands. It helped him to settle down and start concentrating.
Yes, I noticed that too. What about Jack? I noticed he seemed to want to work things out for himself.
You could see him trying out different things rather than asking the teacher for help. What did you make of Naomi?
She seemed to be losing interest at one point, but then she decided she wanted her mouse to be the best, and that motivated her to try harder.
She didn't seem satisfied with hers in the end, though.
No.
Anya was such a star. She listened so carefully and then produced the perfect bird with very little effort.
I think the teacher could have increased the level of difficulty for her.
Maybe. I think it was the first time Zara had come across origami.
She looked as if she didn't really get what was going on.
She seemed unsure about what she was supposed to do. But in the end, hers didn't turn out too badly.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a positive learning experience for her.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 28 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
I think one reason why the origami activity worked so well in this class was that the teacher was well prepared.
Right. I think it would have taken me ages to prepare examples showing each of the steps involved in making the bird, but that was a really good idea. The children could see what they were aiming for. And much better for them to be able to hold something rather than just looking at pictures.
Those physical examples supported her verbal explanations really well.
It's strange that origami isn't used more widely. Why do you think that is?
Well, teachers may just feel it's not that appealing to children who are used to doing everything on computers, especially boys, even if they're aware of the benefits.
Oh, I don't know. It's no different to any other craft activity. I bet it's because so many teachers are clumsy like me.
That's true. Too much effort required if you're not good with your hands.
Well, anyway, I think we should try it out in our maths teaching practice with Year 3. I can see using origami is a really engaging way of reinforcing children's knowledge of geometric shapes, like they were doing in the video. But I think it would also work really well for presenting fractions, which is coming up soon.
Good idea. That's something most of the kids in that class might struggle with. Origami would also be good practice for using symmetry, but I think they did that last term.
OK, well, let's try and get some ideas together and plan the lesson next week.
OK, if you could also...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear a lecturer on a languages course talking about the impact of digital technology on Icelandic, the native language of Iceland. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Right, everyone, let's make a start. Over the past few sessions, we've been considering the reasons why some world languages are in decline. And today I'm going to introduce another factor that affects languages and the speakers of those languages, and that's technology, and in particular, digital technology. In order to illustrate its effect, I'm going to focus on the Icelandic language, which is spoken by around 321,000 people, most of whom live in Iceland, an island in the North Atlantic Ocean. The problem for this language is not the number of speakers, even though this number is small, nor is it about losing words to other languages, such as English. In fact, the vocabulary of Icelandic is continually increasing, because when speakers need a new word for something, they tend to create one, rather than borrowing from another language. All this makes Icelandic quite a special language. It's changed very little in the past millennium, yet it can handle 21st century concepts related to the use of computers and digital technology. Take, for example, the word for web browser. This is vafri in Icelandic, which comes from the verb to wander. I can't think of a more appropriate term because that's exactly what you do mentally when you browse the internet. Then there's an Icelandic word for podcast, which is too hard to pronounce, and so on. Icelandic, then, is alive and growing, and it's a big but, young Icelanders spend a great deal of time in the digital world, and this world is predominantly English. Think about smartphones. They didn't even exist until comparatively recently, but today young people use them all the time to read books, watch TV or films, play games, listen to music and so on. Obviously, this is a good thing in many respects because it promotes their bilingual skills. But the extent of the influence of English in the virtual world is staggering, and it's all happening really fast. For their parents and grandparents, the change is less concerning because they already have their native speaker skills in Icelandic. But for young speakers, well, the outcome is a little troubling. For example, teachers have found that playground conversations in Icelandic secondary schools can be conducted entirely in English, while teachers of much younger children have reported situations where their classes find it easier to say what is in a picture using English rather than Icelandic. The very real and worrying consequence of all this is that the young generation in Iceland is at risk of losing its mother tongue. Of course, this is happening to other European languages too. But while internet companies might be willing to offer, say, French options in their systems, it's much harder for them to justify the expense of doing the same for a language that has a population the size of a French town, such as Nice. The other drawback of Icelandic is the grammar, which is significantly more complex than in most languages. At the moment, the tech giants are simply not interested in tackling this. So, what is the Icelandic government doing about this? Well, large sums of money are being allocated to a language technology fund that it is hoped will lead to the development of Icelandic-sourced apps and other social media and digital systems. But clearly this is going to be an uphill struggle. On the positive side, they know that Icelandic is still the official language of education and government. It has survived for well over 1,000 years, and the experts predict that its future in this nation-state is sound and will continue to be so. However, there's no doubt that it's becoming an inevitable second choice in young people's lives. This raises important questions. When you consider how much of the past is tied up in a language, will young Icelanders lose their sense of their own identity? Another issue that concerns the government of Iceland is this. If children are learning two languages through different routes, neither of which they are fully fluent in, will they be able to express themselves properly?
That is the end of part 4.